Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. If we haven't met yet, my name is Josh Pius. I'm one of the pastors serving you here at Community of Grace Lutheran Church. And this is one of those great weeks where I get to use that line and you get to see it in real ways. I say I'm one of the pastors here at Community of Grace. Our other pastor, Pastor Jose, is going to be joining us in just a few brief moments to continue our series called Grace Changes Everything. And we're asking the question today, what does grace say about grief, about those losses, those times in our life when just everything seems lost and hopeless? Well, Pastor Jose has a message for you that's going to be coming up in just a few moments.
We're going to do it. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you. I'm Pastor Jose, one of the pastors here at Community of Grace. And as Pastor Josh shared with you, we're going to talk a little bit about grief today. And when we talk about grief, it's one of those subjects that it's hard to understand, it's hard to go through, and it's hard to believe that you'll ever come out of. And so when we talk about grief today, there's two basic forms that I'm going to focus on because there's several forms out there. There's like general grief and there's anticipatory grief. And both of those are associated with loss. And so there are several other kinds of grief out there. There's prolonged grief, there's complicated grief. There's a lot of different ways that grief gets worked out, but these are the main two ways that I'm going to focus on today, is this general grief and anticipatory grief, and they are both associated with loss. So let me tell you a little bit about anticipatory grief. That's the kind of grief that we experience when we know that we're going to experience loss. For example, a cancer diagnosis. That's the kind of information that we know is sometimes not going to end well, and we know that our loved one or even ourselves may not make it through this particular chapter, and we are anticipating that loss. That's anticipatory grief. I'll give you some examples of how I come across this. I talk to people who oftentimes are dealing with a loved one that is facing memory loss. And that's a really tough one to go through. The cancer diagnosis is another one. I have even spoken with people that have shared with me that they intend to end a relationship. And the anticipation that comes from that is a type of anticipatory grief. So grief is all around us. When we lose a pet, we grieve. When we lose a job, when we retire. I've known people that have retired that have just completely gotten lost. Grief is so weird sometimes that when I quit drinking, I grieved alcohol. She was my friend. She wasn't a good friend, but she was my friend. And I had to work through all of that grief to get to a different place. Now, if you look at studies, there's a process for grief. A lot of studies have been done on grief, and it kind of breaks down into a few different areas. And the first thing that we experience when we are going through grief is anger. Think about, we'll keep it simple, that goldfish that died. You loved that goldfish since you got it from the pet store. You named it, you changed its water every day, and you are angry that that goldfish is gone. You may be angry at the goldfish for dying. And then you start thinking, you know what, maybe I just need to change the water. Maybe I just need to change water and it just needs fresh water in it. And we go through this process of denial. And then we start thinking, well, you know what? What if I just pray really hard and then God is going to bring it back to life? And then the hard part starts coming in. And now, mind you, none of this is happening in one day. This is happening over a period of time. And we move into the really scary part of grief, and it's called depression. And then once we go through that depression part, we come out at the end where we finally can accept that our goldfish is no longer with us. So let me break this down for you. For me, I'm okay with that list until I get to the word depression. Depression scares me. If you've ever known anyone or you yourself have ever struggled with depression, you know that it's scary. And I don't like it. I'm afraid of it. I've played with it enough in my life, and it scares me. But you see, this is the moment where the gospel comes in and comes to life for us. Let me tell you a little story of what's going on in the Jesus times right now. We're going to go to Matthew chapter 11. And what's going on in chapter 11 is that John the Baptist has sent out his guys to go see what Jesus is up to. And when he's doing that, they're observing, and Jesus knows what's going on as well. And Jesus says to John the Baptist people, hey, you go back and you tell John the Baptist everything that you're seeing out here, because it's good. And then the disciples gather and they realize, and they're talking about the fact that everywhere that Jesus went up until this point, where he had talked to so many people, none of them believed. He was batting 0 at this point. And Jesus goes on and he starts telling his disciples some very important words. He starts telling them, don't be disheartened. And he gets to the core of his message here. And we see it in verses 28 through 30. Now, I want you, I'm going to read this, and we're going to read this together, and then we're going to read it again with different ears, okay? Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now imagine that you are the person swimming in the depths of that depression. You don't want to get up another day. You can't eat another healthy meal. It hurts to go for a walk in the morning. These words are for you. Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's what God promises us. That is the gospel response to grief. Now, when we're going through grief, there's some things we can take into account and remember that will make the process a little bit better. The first one is that, and I can't even say this word right now, that you're going to see on the screen, is that it's a dual process oscillation thing. Yeah, don't know what, I do know what that is, but I don't really know what that means. So what I'm going to tell you is that this grief process, from anger, denial, all the way to acceptance, it's not a linear process. You're going to bounce around and give yourself permission to bounce around. Okay? Remember, Jesus is walking alongside of you through this. Active expression. Let it out. Don't be afraid to cry. Don't be afraid to talk to people and seek professionals out. Balance your solitude and support. There's nothing wrong with you taking a day off and going for a long walk. There's nothing wrong with you going and watching a movie by yourself and crying your eyes out and no one recognizes you. There's also nothing wrong with reaching out with people that you trust that aren't going to hurt you and will support you in important ways. Get out and exercise. Take care of yourselves. Go to the doctor. Okay? If you're not feeling well, this is a time to really, really take care of yourselves. Okay? Don't be afraid to create memories of what you've lost. Okay? Pull out some of those old pictures, write stories, write poems. And you can begin to see. Maybe you do it while you're running and you're crying and you're talking to the doctor at the same time. And which leads me to the last one is don't be afraid to tell the story. Every time you tell that story, it gets a little easier to do. Remember that grief, it's not even a marathon. It's a triathlon. It seems like it's never going to end. Okay? So other ways you take care of yourself is there's things you should not do when you're experiencing grief. For example, don't give yourself a timeline. Don't tell yourself, you know what, by Christmas, I'm going to be over this. No. The other thing is don't ignore pain, whether it's emotional, spiritual, or physical. Take care of yourself. And don't ignore your physical needs. If you start putting on a lot of weight, losing a lot of weight, if you start taking on unhealthy behaviors, that's the time to take a step back and say, Jesus, you are my yoke. Jesus, you have this. Because what does it mean to trust Jesus? It means that I have to die to this process. And I have to let Jesus take it over. You see, I talked about a triathlon. And there's ways that people train for triathlons. And the people that want to win a triathlon, this is what they look like when they're getting ready to train for a triathlon. Okay? And they hook themselves up to machines and they got the finish line in sight. And that is not the journey that Jesus is calling us to. Jesus is telling us to slow down, to take our time. And Jesus is almost like that stopwatch that's rather than pushing us forward, it's actually pulling us back. And Jesus is saying, no, you have to slow down. You have to trust me. That's what it means to follow. Is that Jesus is the one that will carry us out of this. Jesus is the one that will guide us. But we have to remember that when we share Jesus' yoke, we are still moving. We're just moving with Jesus. Here at Community of Grace, we understand that grief is a big part of life. And so we've begun to resource the congregation in different ways. And you can go online, and when you're here in the building, there's resources for grief, and we're even starting some grief support groups in the near future that are getting ready to roll and are already kind of getting their traction here at the church. So don't be afraid to reach out and seek help. And we here at this church, whether it's in person or online, are here to help you with your journey. It's not a race. It's a process. And Jesus is guiding it. Amen.